Hello and welcome to the France 24 interview. I'm Annette Young. For the world's newest nation, it certainly hasn't been an easy 18 months. South Sudan gained independence from Sudan in July 2011. But questions relating to the sharing of oil wealth along with territorial issues still have not been resolved. And it's these questions which have led to clashes between these two countries. But in recent days, the two leaders have agreed to set up a demilitarised zone along their disputed border. But what are the prospects of peace between these two nations? To talk more about this, I'm joined by Michel Rimbaud, a former French ambassador to Sudan, who's just published a history of the country in French. Ambassador Rimbaud, thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you.
First of all, I want to talk to you about Presidents Omar Hassan al-Bashir of Sudan and Salva Kiir of South Sudan, who agreed back in September to withdraw their armies from this border area between their two countries. Neither side actually did. Instead, what we saw were accusations flying across the border, each accusing the other of supporting rebels. Tensions have been boiling. We nearly saw war erupting in April. Do you think this agreement that they've just signed is actually going to stick?
No, I hope they will do so. But I am very skeptical about the chances of bringing a real peace in the region between the two countries, the two neighboring countries, the two, well, let's say, sister countries, because it's very difficult. I think that, and it's one part of the responsibility of the so-called international community during the peace process that is intervened from 2002 until 2005. I think that it was under the coverage, the auspices of the international community and the United States, and under the coverage of the IGAD, the Eastern African sub-regional organization. And I think that all the international community was tired out of seeing this long-lasting conflict since the independence of the Sudan, in fact. And I think that the international community was so tired out of the conflict, of this lasting conflict, that they did everything that was possible to hurry up the peace process.
Through the agreement.
They pushed to reach a quick agreement as soon as possible. It means after 2 years and a half. But 2 years and a half under with a double standard pressures over the government, a very strong pressure, and over the SPLM, SPLA, that was a very weak pressure and a very encouraging pressure. And so it was a double standard disposition. It was not a real mediation that was dispensed in this context, but, I think a partial mediation.
But given we've now got this agreement where they're going to set up this demilitarised zone, and the fact that the two sides have agreed to start talking about these issues,
yes,
the reality is this trust is lacking on both sides, isn't it?
Yes, I think so. I think that at first the main object, of course, of the peace treaty, of the peace process, was to bring peace, and it didn't bring peace. It bring not overt war, but it was a kind of war that is, still lasting until now. And I think that there was no goodwill and no real political will to establish friendly or brotherly relations between the two countries. It was claimed to be, but it never happened.
Do you think it's possible that the two sides could ever have friendly relations?
I think that all the problems are very grave. They are not small, petty problems that were suspended, for example. They were never resolved before the agreement signed in Avasha in January 2005, and they were never resolved before before the referendum for independence, and they were never resolved before the announcement of independence in July 2011. Why? Because they were never discussed, in fact. There were too many questions about the organization of the referendum, too many political maneuvers to gain ground, to gain political, I don't know what advantage, and I think that all the pending problems were left behind, and the international community washed its hands as it usually does, you know.
So, okay, so they've washed their hands of it, so therefore you sound very pessimistic.
Yes, very pessimistic, because I think that a peace treaty that doesn't bring peace is not a peace treaty. Secondly, to leave so many problems behind, and grave problems, it was not just about the demarcation or the drawing from a border line between the north and the south, because it existed at the British time, the condominium time, but it was more or less respected. But right after, well, new disputes did upsurge from, from the peace process, for example, along, because of the oil resources, the oil fields. There was this problem was very essential and crucial for the future of Sudan and the relationship between North and South.
Is there anybody, though, who can... I mean, you're saying that the international community has washed their hands of it. However, you know, there are obviously... It's a conflict that can spill over, have regional impact. Is there anyone within the region who has the wherewithal to bring those two sides together and actually resolve those issues, particularly about the oil revenue and so on?
You know, there was somewhere, there was something that was not sincere, because we must not forget that the peace process was supposed to maintain the unity of the country. It was not a referendum for independence, it was a referendum with two options proposed to the southern voters, maintaining the unity or, well, the independence, the separation. And I think that what happened, that after signing the peace agreement in January 2005, and after 6 months, there was the new constitution that was set in the Sudan, still united Sudan, and John Garang was, well, the warrant of this, of the maintaining the unity between the two parts of the Sudan. But in fact, he died anyway in an accident somewhere at the end of July 2005. John Garang was, I should say, a Sudanese officer, and he was in favor of maintaining the unity of the country. And he had been fighting in this direction all along his political and military life. When he was, when he died, he was replaced by his number two, Salva Kiir. That was not, well, a very great Sudanese patriot. He was fighting openly and overtly for the separation. Well, of course, he didn't say so at the very beginning of the transitional period of 6 years, but even at the midway of the transitional period, he started with saying that, well, claiming for independence and calling the voters to vote for the separation and not for the unity. That was an historical occasion, and that was not to be missed. To be lost.
Ambassador, now I want to swing your attention to Sudan. Now, that was a country where you were there as ambassador between 1994 and 2000. What was Sudan like then compared to what it's like now? How much has the country changed?
I think that it was very different. At first, it was the biggest African Arab countries. It is not anymore. Secondly, I think that it was, at that time, Islamism was considered since 1990 as the public enemy #1 for the international community.
And of course,
until
there was
recent period. Yes,
Osama bin Laden.
Yes, yes, but for different reasons. I think that the first reason to condemn Sudan was not about Osama bin Laden, because his presence in the Sudan was known later, slightly later. It was in 1991 or 1992. But I think that the first accusation against the Sudanese government, the new regime, the Islamist regime, was in fact supporting Saddam Hussein, because it was in the wake, or well, in the aftermath of the Iraqi war, and the new Sudanese government that was, well, since 1989, supported overtly Saddam Hussein. And of course, in America, it was considered as being an offense, an outrage.
So how much has changed now?
It changed a lot. I think that the Islamic orientation, what was called Islamic orientation, that was the background of all the accusations, the open accusations against the government, including, for example, the support to Saddam Hussein, the support to terrorism, against the persecution of the Christian, the slavery, the persecution of women. I think that there was a lot of lies of exaggeration. I think it was not a real equitable storytelling.
Yeah, but having said that, in November the US government renewed its sanctions against the Bashir regime, acknowledging that Khartoum, while it had resolved its disputes with South Sudan, was warning that Darfur and other conflicts still impeded normal ties. I mean, do you agree that Washington was right to continue with that?
I don't know. I am not in the mind of the American leaders, the American president and the American officials. But I think that anyway, there was not a lot of good intentions from the American government, whatever the president, I should say. It was not a Bush question or Obama question. I think that the American policy was openly very negative and very aggressive against the Sudan, and all the pretexts were used to I should say destabilize the Sudan. It was the Sudan was included in the list of 7 countries to be destabilized. It was the list that was made quite official through the Pentagon, through the General Wesley Clark, the Commander-in-Chief of the NATO forces, in 2002 in a book, even written in a book. It's not a conspiration or a plot. It's an overt strategy. 7 countries to be destabilized. The Sudan, Syria, Libya, Iran, Iraq, I don't know what. There were 7 countries, and Somalia and the Sudan. The Sudan was the last one in the alphabetical order, but it was the first one to experiment this new strategy.
Ambassador Rambaud, I'm terribly sorry we've run out of time.
Yeah.
And that's it for this edition of the Frans van Katr interview. If you want to follow me on Twitter, you can, @AnnetteF24. In the meantime, do stay with us here on Frans van Katr.